At the end of the Civil War, the United States entered a period of rebuilding, of reuniting the states that had seceded back into the nation. This period is known as Reconstruction. During Reconstruction, 3 amendments were added to the Constitution. The 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery, was ratified in 1865. But the South resisted the idea of establishing governments that recognized the citizenship and rights of former slaves. To counter this, Congress proposed the 14th Amendment. It went into effect in 1868. The 14th Amendment grants anyone born in the United States, including former slaves, full citizenship and, therefore, the rights of all Americans. Principal among those rights is equal protection of the laws. That means that all people within a state will be treated the same way. The 15th Amendment, which went into effect in 1870, gives the right to vote to all male citizens regardless of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment was clearly intended to make the rights and privileges granted in the Bill of Rights binding on the states as well as the federal government. But for many years, the Supreme Court refused to recognize that intention. In 1896, in the case Plessy v. Ferguson, the court ruled that a Louisiana law establishing separate railroad cars based on race did not violate the Equal Protection Clause. The majority decision stated that the 14th Amendment was not intended to enforce social, as distinguished from political equality, or a commingling of the two races. And the court said, as long as there were railroad cars for both races, even if they were separate, the Equal Protection Clause was not violated. And so the policy of separate but equal, the mainstay of segregation, was established. Throughout the South, there were separate schools, separate water fountains, separate sections of movie theaters, separate everything. But notice, the ruling in Plessy said that the 14th Amendment guaranteed political equality, and the 15th Amendment granted black males the same voting privileges as white males. To get around that, and to deny voting rights to blacks, the Southern states passed restrictive laws requiring literacy tests for voters, poll taxes, and grandfather clauses, which denied the right to vote to anyone whose grandfather had not been eligible to vote. Those restrictions applied to both races, even though, of course, no black man's grandfather had been allowed to vote. And so the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment was not violated. But Jim Crow laws, as segregation laws were called, did not stop African Americans from fighting for the equality guaranteed them by the Constitution. The first major success came in 1954 with the landmark decision Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. The decision declared segregated schools unconstitutional because they did not offer all school children equal protection of the law. Separate educational facilities, Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote, are inherently unequal. The court's decision ushered in the modern civil rights movement. 10 years later, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The law banned segregation in all public places, such as hotels, restrooms, and restaurants, and established the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to prevent job discrimination. The following year, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, which prohibited literacy tests and other laws aimed at restricting African Americans from voting. The 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection has been used to ensure the rights of others who have faced discrimination. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was passed in 1975 to ensure that children with disabilities receive a public education equal to that of other children. In 1990, Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act, which guarantees people with disabilities reasonable accommodations in the workplace, public and commercial facilities, and public transportation. When the 14th and 15th Amendments were proposed, many women hoped that they would be granted the same rights given to men, especially the right to vote. But they had to wait another 50 years for that to happen. In 1920, the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote went into effect. The Equal Pay Act of 1963, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission applied the Equal Protection Clause to women. The fight for equality and the protection guaranteed by the 14th Amendment is ongoing. Racial profiling, equal pay for women, and the rights of all Americans facing discrimination based on race, religion, ethnicity, or gender are issues that are still being addressed. A landmark case involving the Equal Protection Clause was decided by the Supreme Court in 2015. In Obergefell v. Hodges, the court affirmed the right of same-sex couples to marry. That right, Justice Anthony Kennedy said, is also derived from the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection.